thank you so much. My heart is just full listening to you. And I was thinking to myself, wow, because what the Lord had put on my heart to share even this morning that I'll get to in a second really just meshes with what you said. It's just an extension of that. So thank God for that. And thanks for his spirit in that. And so, yeah, as Chuck said, I've been part of Cadence International. It's a Christian organization that works with American and foreign military around the world. It's been around for about 70 years now, started just after World War II. And our heart really is for the military and for the communities around the military. And the thing that makes our American military and even foreign military so special, we feel like, and right for the gospel's message, is because these organizations are they supersede. There's a military and police culture that supersedes their own culture. And that is a culture of sacrifice and community. And those are two key tenets when we talk about Christianity. And so when we start to share the gospel with them about the kingdom culture, which is above their own culture, then all of a sudden it starts to resonate with their hearts and they get that. And because we love the military and call out those sacrifices, we come in and say, we love you because of the way you serve your country, the way you're willing to lay down, the price that you pay to stand up for others. And I go, and that is very Christ-like. And that is part of the gospel that we see that. And so we're going to honor you. We're going to move in to honor that. And what that does is it opens doors cross-culturally in ways that you just can't imagine. And so we see these folks as really, really unique to the world and unique ambassadors, and you have unique positions in this world to protect the world or to even in some cases change nations. And so especially in the foreign cultures where there's police and military of foreign nations, most of them are highly involved in politics. Not so much here in the US, but cross-culturally, when you think about, let's say, Burma right now, it's being led by military people. And so if you can change the heart of the military people that are the key holders of these nations, you could actually affect a nation completely. And I've worked in Cambodia for about 17 years now. And that's another nation where it's highly, highly involved with military in the nation there. And so we have about, I was working with about 10 generals that are Christians who give their life to the Lord out of that culture. And we have seen that nation change, and they end up opening doors for other types of ministry that can happen. So that's just a brief example of what Cadence is all about. And we've got missionaries all across the globe. We've got what we call hospitality houses that are outside military installations to provide home away from home for soldiers and sailors around the world, and to provide that Bible study and a safe place for them to live. And so that's kind of the reason I got into this, is because I was a Navy CB for 6 years and was led to the Lord by a Navy chaplain and then discipled in a Cadence hospitality house in Rota, Spain. So it's in my blood. You know, my dad was in the military, I was in the military, got led to the Lord by a Navy chaplain, and here I am, you know, working with the military again. And so I've been with Cadence for about 30 years, giving back, and just feel like it's my wheelhouse and my calling. And fell in love with cross-cultural ministries about, again, 17 years ago. And so that's how I got met up with the Free Burma Rangers, because we were living in Thailand for 13 years and wanted to reach out to Burma, and heard about this crazy organization called the Free Burma Rangers that was going across borders and reaching the oppressed peoples and ethnic groups of Burma. And I was like, wow, what is happening here? This is amazing. And there was good things being said and bad things being said, like, oh, it's illegal and it's all this, but these guys are going into these hard, fierce places and taking the gospel into these areas. And I'm like, okay, I got to be a part of this. I got to see what's going on. And that's when I first met Dave Eubank. And we hit it off right away. And I've been a part of the organization for about 10 years now. And, during that time, we started going to the Middle East, where I think I met Chuck the first time there, like he mentioned, in Kurdistan. And I just recently even in Syria. And so, again, the thing that Danilo was saying, Pastor Danilo was saying, that really struck me is, like Chuck said, we've been in some pretty frontline areas, and FBR, Free Burma Rangers, we're not like a lot of other organizations. We go towards the sound of the bullets and bombs because we know that that's where the greatest needs are. Other organizations that are relief type organizations have policies that keep them back from those places necessarily. Sometimes it's 20 miles even. And so it's great. They have a role to play. They set up those refugee camps and receiving places and hospitals and things like that, which are desperately needed in these situations. But oftentimes the point in which people are the most desperate are right there on the front lines, where they're just getting liberated, or they're coming out of a battle zone and they're completely shattered, as Chuck was saying. And I don't know how many times my heart was breaking over and over and over and over again, because, and especially in Syria, this is where these words come in. I really call these places fierce landscapes, and that term is based on a book I read a while ago called The Solace of Fierce Landscapes. And the author, Belden Lane, points out that often God leads us or puts us into places that are extremely difficult. And in those moments, we find salvation. It's because we're in our brokenness, in our emptiness, when we get to the end of ourselves, often God now has an opportunity to move into our hearts. And so one of the things that I have experienced, as Chuck was describing, is that as these ISIS families were coming out of Bashika or out of Baghouz in Syria, completely hammered physically and spiritually, and then there's a literal physical desert. It's flat and dry and rocks, and there's no water, there's no buildings, there's no infrastructure, and we're just meeting them in the middle of the desert. I went, wow, it just struck me. This is exactly what's happening in their hearts. The fierce landscape of their souls was creating an opportunity for us to come and meet them there and to give them love and to share with them a literal drink of water in the middle of all of that. And all the ideology, all the broken thinking, all the path that they had been following along the way, thinking that they were going to have salvation and righteousness through all of those means, through a false religion or a misguided religion, I would say those are the opportunities when they get there and they're looking at themselves going, I'm completely blown up. I've just lost 8 of my family members in a building, and I'm burned. I'm at the end of myself. And here's this white-faced person who I've been taught is an infidel that doesn't know God, and he's giving me medical care. He's giving me water. He's bandaging me. He's offering me a prayer and a hug in the middle of all of this. It disrupts all of that. It's like you're just opened up a fire hose of grace on top of that. And they're like, what do they do? And Chuck, I was going to say that, all these times with the Muslim culture and other types of cultures that may have a different way of following God, they have never once, in my experience, turned down prayer. When you come up alongside somebody that's completely shattered, it is sacred ground. And the reason I call it sacred ground is because in that moment, they often meet the Lord. It's like Moses meeting he didn't even understand what was happening, right? He sees the burning bush and God speaks to him and says, take your shoes off, brother. You're on sacred ground. And I really feel like in those fierce landscapes in both the physical world and in our hearts is God can meet us. And because he meets us, it becomes a sacred encounter. And so one of the greatest things that I appreciate about working with the Free Burma Rangers is that the sacredness of helping people in desperation. Because I really do feel like their hearts are opened at the same time. And, the crazy thing is people see the FBR movie, the Free Burma Ranger movie, and they see all this, running around with bullets flying, and they're like, oh, I could never do that. And I get that a lot. It's like, well, how that makes sense. How do you guys do that? And it's like, oh, I could never do that. And I said, look, brother, I often will challenge them, because it doesn't always have to be in Syria where there's bombs and bullets that are going off to have sacred ground, to have a fierce landscape. And so my challenge is always putting that kind of back on them and saying, there are people in your life that are in a fierce landscape relationally, or in a situation in life, your coworker, your neighbor. If you don't spend the time and take courage to go in there and be curious and to find out where people are at, they may be wandering in a fierce landscape completely alone, but really open to having love and having somebody come alongside them and help guide them and give them care. That's where not being led by comfort and fear come into play. And that's one of the big things for Free Burma Rangers. We say this all the time. Don't be led by comfort or fear or pride. And so what can we do? I think relationally, these fierce landscapes, because God is so good to us, it doesn't have to be in those moments where there's bombs and bullets going on. It could be this current situation that we're at, right? People are experiencing life in a way they never have before at these times, as Pastor Danila was just mentioning. We're locked down, we're stuck with each other. There's a lot of conflict going on with families because normally we don't spend that much time together. I mean, Lord knows my wife and I have had moments where we have to revisit a bunch of old crap that keeps coming up in our relationship. And I'm like, what's happening here? It's a fierce landscape, because I'm telling you, just yesterday we sat on the couch and talked about that. And we were just so frustrated about the fact that we're still having to visit this garbage in our lives that keeps affecting our relationship. And yet I walked away from that going, fierce landscape, sacred ground. Lord, you're meeting us there. And what it's telling me and what it's telling my wife, Sandra, is that we can't do this on our own. We need the helper to help us in this. And therefore, that is a sacred moment. And so most of us paint Christianity in a way that we're trying to avoid all of that kind of stuff. Nobody's a masochist that wants to live in a constant, fierce place, and yet salvation is found in those places. And so I am desperately trying to learn how to walk in those ways and learn to embrace the suck a bit, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we've been doing this. I'm just going to read one little short quote, Chuck, from this book. And it says this: the spiritual function of fierce terrain is to bring us to the end of ourselves. Oh, I so love that. To the abandonment of language and the relinquishment of ego. A vast expanse of jagged stone, desert sand, and towering thunderheads has a way of challenging all the mental constructs in which we are tempted to take comfort and pride, thinking we have captured the divine. The things that ignore us save us in the end. Again, what great words for us to live in this world. So my challenge to us, all of us as men, especially in these days, is to take that lead, to have courage, to walk into the fierce landscapes of people's lives. You don't have to get it right. You just have to go in with love and courage and be curious and offer love in these times when it's just craziness in this world.
Fantastic.